coordinator here at Michigan. I also am a student as well, so I do recruiting part-time here. So if you guys have any questions, you know, maybe just want to talk through Peace Corps or whatnot, we have office hours 4 days a week. You can email us at peace.corps@umich.edu as well. We're here to help figure it out, any application problems, anything. We also do interviews here on campus, so that's really nice for you guys. And so tonight, Peace Corps and your global career. We're going to have the panelists talk a little bit about how Peace Corps has helped influence what they're doing today, and if it shifted what they are currently doing from what they were maybe doing before their Peace Corps experience, and just talk a little bit about their experience and, you know, how the skills that they developed and what they did and how that has helped them in the career that they are currently in today. So if you just want to go ahead and introduce yourself and kind of talk to that effect, that'd be great.
All right.
So you're sitting right there.
I'm like, wait a minute here. Hi, my name is Coyne, and I work for the University of Michigan right now. I've been here for about a year. I was a volunteer. I served in Paraguay from 1995 to 99, and I also worked at the Peace Corps headquarters in Washington. I did a whole bunch of other things, and then I went to headquarters in 2006. I worked there for about 5 years, from 2006 to 2011, just last year. And I worked in the Inter-America and Pacific region, supporting staff and volunteers in basically Latin America, the Caribbean, and South Pacific Islands. I don't know if I should just stop there and give Roland a chance.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah. Otherwise, I'll just keep talking, and eventually he's going to whack me and tell me I have to no.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Roland Johnson, I met a few years I was walking through, and I work here at the university as well. I'm the director of community partnerships for the Ginsberg Center here. I don't know if you are familiar. There's an old house that's getting a lot of TLC right now through construction off the hill in South University of Costa. So that, some of you are nodding like it's about time. No. But I work there, and we do a bunch of stuff and related to around civic engagement and service learning. And I get the privilege of being able to work with our partners outside of Ginsberg. I hadn't quite got the opportunity to work at headquarters yet. Who knows, I might make my way over there at some point. But I served in, gosh, when was it, 2003 to 2005 in Nepal and in Burkina Faso, which is a little atypical for most volunteers, and I can talk a little bit more about that once we get into that experience. So that's me, and I think I should stop there.
Just introduce yourself, what you're doing, and then where you serve.
Great. I'm Chamisa, and I'm current dual degree Master's in Social Work, Master's in Public Health student here at UVM. And I served in Costa Rica from 2009 until 2012. I stayed on the 3rd year, and I just got back at the end of June.
Nice. So I guess if you guys could maybe talk a little bit about what you were doing before Peace Corps, and then what you did during Peace Corps, and then kind of how that experience kind of led to what you did afterwards, and then ultimately where you are and what you're doing today. So,
let's see. Before Peace Corps, I worked. I finished college. I was a history major. I had no idea what I was going to do with that, but that's what I did. I liked the field, and then I worked basically in administrative jobs for a while, and I worked for about 5 years before I went into Peace Corps. But I realized I was working. I basically worked 2 jobs so that I could save money to travel. Until finally one year I went, why am I doing this? Why don't I just go live somewhere? And so I made my only New Year's resolution that I've ever kept, and that was to find a way to live and work and experience another culture for a long period of time. Didn't know what that meant. But I looked into Peace Corps, and I looked into teaching English as a second language or as a foreign language. And of the 2 options, I really gravitated to Peace Corps. It just felt right. I talked to a lot of volunteers. I talked to the Chicago Peace Corps recruiting office because I'm from Illinois, Chicago area. And once I made that decision that this was the right thing, everything fell into place. And so I did the application, the interview worked out, the medical clearance, everything just went right into place. And everything felt right that way. So that's always good when that happens. I went in, let's see, in May of 1995, I went to Paraguay. And I thought it was a 2-year service like they say, but I apparently didn't get that message because I stayed 4 years. My mother was a little surprised. But my first 2 years I worked with a rural farmers cooperative. I was a cooperative development volunteer in the business sector. And in 1995, you have to step back and realize we didn't have email. We barely had computers at that point. And so what I ended up doing was I ended up teaching a lot of computer skills because the cooperative I worked with had just gotten a computer. Well, they got the computer a few months after I started working there. And so I really ended up teaching how to use a computer. And it was a very rural setting. I was 50 kilometers off a dirt road, so there was just, you know, we had electricity. We did not have running water in the community. Everybody had wells or used a neighbor's well for running water and such. So to have a computer was a pretty big deal in that town, because the only other computer that around was in the municipality, so the mayor's office had the computer. So I did a lot of teaching of computer skills. I also worked with an education committee, and I really enjoyed it. And I talked with my boss there, which is called your Peace Corps program manager or your associate Peace Corps director. And I talked with him about staying because I was interested in extending for another year in my site. And at the time he said, well, we're thinking of putting another volunteer in your site, but we have this pilot project we want to do with municipalities and see if, you know, there's something that Peace Corps volunteers can do to help municipalities out, because Paraguay had gone through a dictatorship for a very long time period. They really didn't understand democracy. There was a lot of mistrust between the people and the government, and they were trying to find ways to break that down and unite the municipality with the community more. And I really wasn't sure what I was getting myself into, but I said, that sounds cool. And so I ended up extending for a year and working on that. And I changed sites, so I moved from a very rural area to a small urban area outside of the capital and worked with a municipality, and it went really well. I worked with the municipality, I worked with a lot of governmental organizations and non-governmental organizations, and got to know a lot of area communities as well. I ended up I did another year. Towards the end of that year, I ended up deciding to stay longer again. So I had to make another phone call home that said, hey Mom, I'm going to be here a little longer still. And so I stayed another 6 months. But that was great though, because I was able to work with the project, and we were actually able to make it into an actual project for volunteers and develop the project plan and volunteer assignment descriptions and everything, which is really exciting. And so I finished in March of '99. I went home for 1 month, and then I went back and I worked as a technical trainer for the first group of volunteers to serve on that municipal project. So that was a really cool experience to see it from the very beginning stages of we're not sure where this is going, to see it become an actual project and be able to help train new volunteers on it. So that was a really exciting experience for me. It gave me a lot of direction as well. You'll hear that from people a lot, that, you know, that defined my life, that Peace Corps moment, that experience really shaped where I'm going. One key thing that I learned from that is I love working on pilot projects. I would never have known that without that experience, but just to be able to take a look at a big situation and try to figure out how can we make something work? How do we, you know, who needs to be involved in this, and how do we pull that together to actually make a project work? And so my career path has really not been in a particular specific field so much as looking for how to find those projects that I can help grow and develop, and that's what I've done. I finished Peace Corps, I worked in the study abroad office for a while. It was a small nonprofit organization, small study abroad, not with the university, but then after that I did my master's degree, and then I ended up working with a place called Earthwatch Institute, and I developed a project for them, working with education projects, and that eventually brought me to my role into Peace Corps, of course, which I did for 5 years, and I loved that experience because that gave me a chance to really support volunteers and staff in the field. But that also brought me to Michigan as well, because my position here, I work in the provost's office, but it's a newly created position to support international health and safety for all of our travelers. And that's a new field altogether with colleges and universities. A lot of colleges have study abroad programs, and health and safety aspects are a component, but they're not a huge significant component until something like Arab Spring happens, or until there's a big earthquake and tsunami in Japan, and a university is wondering, oh my God, how many people do we have there, and are they okay? And so that's my role here, is to really help support the risk assessment process for that, and then to support our travelers when something like that happens. And obviously working with staff at the university to do this, but you know, having that connection with faculty and staff and students, of course, to see, you know, are your needs being met, are you safe where you're going, and how can we support you in that role? So that's something that's been really exciting for me, is to be able to work with those projects, which is experience I gained from being a volunteer, and it's something I look back on all the time. I love it. Never regret it for a moment. I love the fact that I did that. But I'm going to stop here because I could keep going on and on, as you will learn with Peace Corps volunteers. So I will give one of my colleagues a chance to talk.
You want to introduce yourself? So everybody sung their favorite song out really, really loud.
Oh, great.
Joke.
Yeah, my name is Ashleigh. I'm a student here at the School of Nursing in the second career program. And I was a Peace Corps volunteer from 2008 to 2010 in Guatemala. I overlapped a little bit with Mackenzie, so we know each other from that, but what else were you?
No, that's good for
All right.
Do you want to go, or you want me to take a stab?
You go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, so Peace Corps, how that happened. So first off, we may have to talk because your career trajectory might be, I might need some mentoring through that. 'Cause there's a lot of similarities. My Peace Corps journey is I'm originally from Saginaw, Michigan, so it's about an hour and a half north. I'm gonna do that hand thing. It's like right there. We're down here. I'm right there. And so I'm originally from Saginaw, and I jokingly call it the most southern up north place you'll go to. You probably can hear me talk. And folks are just really nice and sweet. So I finished school, high school there, and trudged out to Colorado to go to a small liberal arts school. For some reason, I had the wild idea that I thought I might want to get a PhD in philosophy and theology. Let's just say that did not happen. So I ended up becoming a business major out there. And throughout that sort of tenure there, I used to actually come back and do manufacturing management in an automotive component facility. So I was managing folks that were doing skilled trades and fixing machinery and stuff, managing a bunch of people working robotic welders. I mean, they actually trusted me with robotic welders. I don't know why, but they did. And managing the people that were doing that. So that was sort of, while I was in school, this parallel trajectory. And also thinking, I had this wild idea, oh, maybe I'll go to law school. So, you know, doing this short gig with the Justice Department, you know, I was like, oh, this sounds great. My senior year, I met a guy that did international human rights law. And he did it he was a constitutional lawyer, and he did work very differently. So he would go into countries that were experiencing transitions in their governmental structures, whether through dictators leaving or slowly edging those dictators through international organizations that have them to secure people's rights a bit more. He would work with them on legislators on structuring their constitutions. For some reason, I don't know why, as a business major, I took this Supreme Court and Constitutional Law class. And I met this guy that became a great mentor of mine. We would talk, and I really enjoyed this class. So I try not to be that teacher's pet student, but you really like somebody like this. He's scared of the guy you want. And he talked to me. He said, "I think you got the temperament to possibly do the Peace Corps thing." And I was like, "What?" He's like, "Yes, I think you could do this Peace Corps thing." I was like, "So what does this entail?" And we talked about what it meant to be an expat and doing all that stuff. And at the time, there was an office out in Denver, so I said, what the heck? Worst, let's throw an application in and see what happens, right? Because I already had it mapped out. I was going to come back here, get this good job doing this manufacturing management, and be paid very well to watch parts go by, let's just say I graduated, and that did not happen. I've been working with this place for like 4 years. I get this call from a great guy. He's like, yeah, we're on a global hiring freeze. I was like, okay. And then I had the next thing with the Justice Department. I was like, well, obviously I'll get this job I've already done for free as a volunteer, And the only place that really called back was Peace Corps at the time. And so that was a process, and it was the beginning of a really interesting journey. Whether you start with the medical clearance forms and the dental review, which is a process, and just meeting people along that way to start this journey. I was at home after I finished school, back in Saginaw, and I get this call from Peace Corps. All your information is clear. We would like to offer you a spot. We have an opening in Nepal. you have X amount of days, hours, I don't remember, it was some really short period of time to make a huge life decision, to go, please call us back and let us know. And I got off the phone, did a quick, meditation on it, and it's like, well, okay, let's do it, let's go. Little did I know, a few months later, I was on a plane with a bunch of people I did not know, taking the longest flight I was ever going to take in my life around the world. And you really get to know somebody on a really long flight with airplane. So this was the start of it. I mean, it was landed in Nepal, and while I was there, my work was focused around business development. I was the second group of business development and enterprise development volunteers in Nepal, which I didn't realize was a really big deal at the time, but was. And I worked with a microfinance bank in a small town, in a small city called Kalea, about 15K from the Indian border near a town called Birganj. It was what you don't, it was everything you thought Nepal would be, but the absolute opposite. I couldn't see the great Himalayan mountains at all, unless it was a really, really, really clear day. It was really, really flat where I was, a lot of rice paddies, and hot. Hot, hot, hot. Like, it's 110 degrees and the fan just stopped hot. But amazing people. Got the opportunity to work with this bank. 98% of our women were our clients were women rather, for the bank, which was a big deal in Nepal because it was opening capital resources to people that wanted to start businesses in a culture that was very patriarchal, and at the time, these folks didn't get access to that stuff. So I got to meet these really amazing, tenacious entrepreneurs that were leveling around like 4'11" or something like that, with some of the most tenacious business people I had ever met in my life. One of the coolest experiences I had while I was there was seeing a woman write her name on bank documentation for the first time. Nepal is written phonetically, and prior to us working with this bank, this lady couldn't read functionally. She couldn't write Nepali. She couldn't do basic numeracy. And a few months later, this really tenacious woman wrote her name on this bank documentation the first time to take out the first loan for her first business. As I'm sitting at the table, wondering if somebody's cutting onions under my eye and thinking, I'm not going to cry here, I'm not going to cry. This jovial woman gets to take this awesome step to her next piece of her life. Really doing something amazing. And so that was a powerful experience for me, because what it showed me is I may not necessarily be the person that's up front, but I really enjoy orchestrating things so they function better. You wouldn't know that if you walked into my office and seeing the paper piles, but I'm really good at that other stuff, organization. So I did that with Nepal. While I was there, I actually got to do some other cool stuff. There's these things called secondary projects that you have to do when things get a little slow with your primary work, which happens. I got to host a radio show in the next town over called the American Music Hour. Didn't know that was a big deal until I came home one day and my host was like, oh my gosh, you were on the radio. And the town was like, yeah. I was like, really? I didn't know that was a big deal. I did that. Got to work with other volunteers doing business development stuff. I'll kind of speed up here. I had a very interesting experience. You see two countries up there. Thank you for getting them both up. Nepal was in the middle of a civil conflict at the time, and one of the toughest moments for me was getting a phone call about an evac. Doesn't happen very often in Peace Corps. It is very rare that it does happen at times, but they're very serious about security. And I thought it was a drill. I got a call and said, hey, we need you to pack up like you're not coming back. I was like, oh, you mean one of those drills? Yeah, I'm making pancakes right now, so I'll get, It's like, no, we really need you to pack up. And that was a tough moment because I had to tell this family that I lived with for over a year. I had this host mom, this brother, these two sisters that I was going to have to go. It's still tough today. Luckily, through the advent of the internet, I get to keep up with them now, and hopefully can get back. But that started me on to this journey in Thailand, meeting with the great Peace Corps people. What you'll find as you go through the application process, there's a lot of hurry up and wait, and sometimes a lot of hurry up. And here I was in Thailand trying to figure out what just happened to me, and so I said, so what would you like to do? Would you like to continue on, or would you like to go back home and re-up? And me, like a nutcase, said, yeah, what the heck, I'll keep going. Where am I going? They said Burkina Faso. I said, who? At that point, a little Googling to figure out where the heck I was going, and I landed in Burkina Faso in West Africa, which is in the middle of West Africa, just north of Ghana. I got to live in the capital of Ouagadougou. So if you ever get a trivia can, somebody says, what is the capital of Burkina Faso? It is Ouagadougou. And so while I was in Ouaga, I got to do business development there as well. So I got a really cool chance to work with a really large Burkinabe nonprofit equivalent to like I don't know, like a big Red Cross or equivalent to a large United Way. And they wanted to start a microfinancing bank, and my job was to help them figure out how to best do that. I also worked with a group that did work with 10,000 villages and artists to get their stuff going. So interesting turnaround. Got to learn French. After Peace Corps, I was trilingual. I spoke Nepali, French, and English. And I'm talking a lot, so I'll wrap up. And how that's affected my work and what I do now. After leaving Peace Corps, I came back. I did AmeriCorps for a year. I didn't quite get enough agenda property, so I moved out to Iowa, did community development work through AmeriCorps Vista for about a year and a half. Decided at that point I probably should work towards getting a paycheck, and did an MBA where I worked at a school to help launch an entrepreneurship institute and doing regional economic development, which led me to where I am now. And a lot of the work I do now, all of my work from Peace Corps is very relevant, because when we step into communities, part of my job is to make sure as an institution we do that responsibly, that we don't take advantage of the places that we walk into, and that there's really good relationships. And so I take my job serious, and that's sort of how Peace Corps is starting to shape. Sorry. You get to talking and you don't even know where you're at.
I'm Chamisa again. So I finished my undergraduate degree at a small liberal arts school and got my degree as a human development social relations major, which is kind of social worky by nature. And I moved out to Portland, Oregon. I worked for 3 years in Oregon as an early Head Start home visitor, also kind of in the social work people-focused field with mothers of children aged 0 to 3. And I loved that work, but then I was ready for something new. And I think when I finally decided Peace Corps was for me was when I realized that 2 years is not actually that long. As a young person, it was just like 2 years that seemed like forever. I couldn't imagine being away for that long, and like leaving my family, leaving my friends. Like that was a huge amount of time. And then all of a sudden, I had been in Portland for 2 years, and was like, oh, this is nothing. Like it just flew by. I don't know where those 2 years went. And so Peace Corps didn't seem that long anymore. And I signed up and got sent to Costa Rica as a Children, Youth, and Families volunteer. I had an amazing experience as I stayed on for a 3rd year as well in my site. I did a lot of different projects. The majority were focused on women's empowerment, and so I got a grant with a group of women, and we built a greenhouse and ran that greenhouse as kind of like a micro enterprise for these women, as well as just a social activity, getting women out of the house and empowered. Taught a lot of child development classes, parenting classes, women's exercise class. That was kind of a fun one. That one is still continuing today. And these are like secondary projects that come about because people see you doing what you love to do. And so I was exercising a lot in town just for my own mental health. And these women were like, oh, a few of them were like, I want to learn how to I want to exercise. And I was like, great. Sounds good. But I had never taught a class, and that sounded really scary. And I was like, I don't think I'm actually capable of teaching anyone. But I was like, well, if you can get some women to show up, like, I'll teach a class and we'll see what happens. And like 20 women showed up. And I was like, oh, I guess I'm teaching class. So I taught a class, and they kept coming back. And you realize that a lot of things, like that was a good example of you think you don't know what you're doing, but they don't have, my community no one in my community had ever been in an exercise class. So they had no idea what to compare it to. And so I'm comparing myself to these exercise classes I've taken in the States with people who are very well trained, and they have no image of what that is. And so my class was great, and they loved it. And now they're teaching it. And so then they're empowered and teaching this class, and just having a great space to be out of their house and together with each other. Also did like sports camps and did some infrastructure projects, like built a playground and worked on the roads. Lots of different things, but all of it was around community development and people skills, really just spending a lot of time getting to know people. And I feel like that's why all of my projects were successful, was building these relationships, and that's really important to me. So I stayed on a third year to continue my projects, as well as to figure out what I was going to do when I finished Peace Corps. And used that third year to apply to graduate school, and now I'm here to do social work and public health and kind of stay in the same fields.
Hi. Sorry I was late. I learned about the Peace Corps in the 9th grade. My 9th grade science teacher it was her first year teaching out of college, and her roommate from college was serving in Ghana, and we would send her care packages all the time. And I came home and I told my mom, like, I'm doing this. And my mom was like, yeah, right. So from that moment, I was on that track. And I feel like 98% of my Peace Corps service was really wanting to be there, and 2% was like sticking it to my mom. You know? So I, excuse me. Yeah, I was just dead set on that goal from, age 14 on. So there was no question. I applied during the February of my last year of school. I graduated in December, so it was about a year out, and I graduated school in 2.5 years and went to 3 different colleges. So I was like all over the place for Peace Corps, and I went to Guatemala 3 weeks after finishing college, and it was just really crazy. So Peace Corps was the first strangely stable place I had been in a really long time, and I feel like it was I grew up a lot in the Peace Corps, and I think it's a little bit different than how some other volunteers had their experience. I mean, I was 20 years old when I went, but I wouldn't have really done it any other way. I think my experience would be completely different now, but that also, it was such a moldable time in my life, and it really has shaped who I am as a person and how I look at the world. But my primary project in Guatemala was working as a school health facilitator with elementary schools. So the volunteer before me had taught health and hygiene and nutrition classes in my site. And when I got there, my job was to teach the teachers to be able to incorporate those lessons into their regular curricula, so that when I left, I was hopefully the last volunteer in that site and working on that project, and when I left, they would be able to carry that on. And I enjoyed that. I really enjoyed working with the adults and everything. And the kids were great. We did some infrastructure projects along with that, and I also served as the director of a camp called GLOW, which exists in a lot of Peace Corps countries. It stands for Girls Leading Our World, and it was a really tremendous experience. A lot of girls and young women in the area of Guatemala that I lived start having families and getting married and things at a very young age, and like 12, 13, 14. So this camp was for girls from about 12 to 17, and it was just, the most special part about it to me was that it was really a place for them to be girls. They got to have fun and giggle and laugh, and they had, a couple days away from doing the laundry and cooking and raising children and all of that kind of stuff, and they could ask us questions so openly, and that's more than anything that we taught them, just giving them that space to be girls and not women. Adults for a couple of days was really, really neat. And I also did a lot of HIV education prevention and worked with a community health center. So going into the Peace Corps, I had thought about getting a master's in social work when I got out, but had always in the back of my mind wanted to do nursing. And I grew up with a best friend who had a sister with some health problems and had been serving as her care provider for years. And I just didn't think I could do nursing because I wasn't like Anna. I didn't have all that skills and knowledge going into college that she did. But what I learned from Peace Corps, that is just the overarching takeaway point from my experience, is that you can learn to do anything. Like you mentioned, I had no idea how to build a latrine, but I learned, and I did it, and they're still standing. And I had no idea how to do workshops on HIV, and I did like 24 of them before I left the country. I ran that girls' camp. You see a problem and you figure out how to fix it, and you learn along the way, and it works. So working with a health clinic, I ran into some situations where I was helping translate for American doctors who were male and things like that, and women didn't want them to see them, you know, provide care for them. So we'd like set up a screen and I would do stuff, which is not okay by Peace Corps, I don't think. But I learned, I had to learn in that moment to be able to help these women. And so I came back and I decided to go to nursing school, and I worked for 2 years because I didn't have, my bachelor's degree is in Spanish, so I didn't have any of that prerequisites that you need for nursing school. So my job working as the director of GLOW helped me get a job when I got back as the director of Girls on the Run, which is really popular here in this area. But I oversaw the Wayne, Oakland, and Macomb County Detroit chapter of Girls on the Run for 2 years when I came back, and I took some classes here and there while I was doing that. And so Peace Corps really directly helped me get that job, and it's definitely helped me not only decide to go back to nursing school, and I'm actually really interested in midwifery, and because of working with midwives in Guatemala, but it's also helping me on a daily basis in school and in my former job. With Girls on the Run, I had to plan 5Ks, and I ran in a couple, but I had never planned one before, and I was like, you know what, I can learn how to do this. I learned how to put Foley catheters in last week, and I was like, I will learn how to do this. And that, I'm forever grateful for that knowledge that Peace Corps gave me, that you can learn how to do anything you want to. That's how it's helped me the most.
Great, thank you. So I guess now we can just open it up to questions. You guys can ask about their Peace Corps experience, you know, pretty much, you know, whatever you guys want to ask.
Did you wish that that you had maybe applied or had done Peace Corps earlier than you had or later than you had? Maybe, you know, you would think, oh, if I had this knowledge, I could probably be, I wish I could do this job, so I wish I had this experience beforehand so that I could, you know, start this project. Or did you think, oh, I should have done this right out of college instead of waiting? Or, you know, can you talk about the timing? Because 2 years seems kind of daunting, and deciding when to start that 2 years is very, so maybe, yeah, it wasn't anything particular.
I think when 2 years, I mean, for me, it was, I had to wait and see that 2 years wasn't daunting, when all of a sudden, like, that time commitment didn't feel like a big deal. And Peace Corps is a big deal, and the first few months of it, sometimes the first whole year of it, it's a commitment. And like, there's many days when you're like, what did I sign up for? Like, what am I doing here? This is really hard. I'm lonely. This is like, I don't know what's going on around me. I can't communicate the way I want to communicate. And so you want to be ready enough in yourself to like have that challenge and like want to overcome it. And I think all of us would say, I mean, we wouldn't change it. Like, I would never regret having done Peace Corps, but it is hard, and you have to want to make it through the experience. And so feeling like in yourself you're ready for that time, which is going to be so different for everyone. I think for me it was great to have done undergrad, had a few years of working experience, and kind of being like, you know, figuring out like what I was interested in and being ready to live abroad for 2 years. But then I also had other volunteers with me who came fresh out of undergrad and just loved it, and they were fine as well.
I wouldn't. It's an interesting question, but it's also a difficult question, because I think when you start the process, I want to say it is what it is when you start, and that's the timing of it, because you may want to think that you're going to get all these things together before you go. Like, I want to have this line in check, and I want to have this in check, and I need to do this, you know. Or, you know, the aspiring volunteer says, I'm really going to learn, you know, Moroccan Arabic, because I know that's what you know. And you really can't plan around it. It's something about being in that space in there. And 2 years sound like a long time. We always joke, you know, Peace Corps was the longest, the toughest job you ever loved. And we used to say, oh, the longest vacation you'll ever hate. You know, but the reality is, it is 2 years of life around people that you're growing with. And that 2 years is going to be different and it's going to be unique for you. But you will have a shared experience. Like, we all can sit here and nod. Like, we all walk to an elevator. The first question might be, how many more domestic farm animals could we get in here with us? And you can have that joke because you drive on, you drive on transport, and there's like you, a goat, a chicken, another person.
Yeah.
But you had a shared experience. But the timing of it is going to be what is going to be best for you. Sometimes it's easier to do when you don't have a whole lot of commitments. We also had a couple in Nepal. I think they had to be pushing like 63. And they were amazing volunteers. I mean, and they did it the other part. What I would say you don't want to be is you don't want to be the person. I meet folks a lot of times that say, "Oh my gosh, I really wish I would have did Peace Corps." And then we have to have that conversation. Well, you can still do it, right? But you want to be in a space where you can go and you can do it. But that time is going to be different for probably everybody in this room.
And I think that it really, I could have had a completely different experience going a couple years later than I did. And I feel like I was really naive going into it and young and everything. But like I said before, like I don't know if it would be better or worse, just different, you know? It's going to be different at any time in your life, but you're going to serve a different purpose in your community, and your Peace Corps experience is going to serve a different purpose to you. So it's just going to be different, depending on when you go. Yeah.
I think Roland, sorry, I'm coming from the back here. I think the other thing to kind of keep in mind is the fact that it's going to be when it best fits you. It's going to be your personal decision and see when it best fits into your area. As Roland said, you know, there are couples that serve, there are people that have retired that serve. There is no age cap with the Peace Corps. So we understand, you know, I did it straight when I finished my undergrad. It went straight into Peace Corps. And for me, it was a perfect timing. I wasn't married, I didn't have kids. Nothing was really holding me back. And I was up for the adventure to go ahead and pursue this journey. So it really is going to be dependent on you and see where you see yourself for the next couple of years. The opportunities of doing a Master's International program, doing a college program when you get back, if graduate school is something you're interested in, and really basing it off what you personally want to get out of it as well. So I think everyone on the panel answered it perfectly. It really is going to be personal choice and where you see yourself and what type of role you want Peace Corps to play for you.
And you have to remember that the application process can also take 6 months to a year. So if you want to think, like, you may not be ready in this moment, but like in 6 months to a year, will you be ready? Because it's for many people, it can take up to that full year to get you into Peace Corps before they give you an assignment.
The thing you don't want to do, there's a question about the thing you don't want to do is that I need to wait to get these things in order to do it. Because you hear that like, oh, if I just make enough money and then I can go. Or if I get enough professional experience. Because you're going to go somewhere, and let me guarantee you could professionally work in that area, it will be not a thing when you show up. Not a thing. So there was a question behind it.
Two quick questions. One was, how supportive is Peace Corps institutionally and structurally in that transition and while you're there? And that question is posed to all of you all. And then particularly as it relates to being a woman, because I've kind of heard like some horror stories, and not just like hearsay, but like first narrative. So for me, being a woman, that's kind of like makes me not necessarily, to be quite frank, concerned. And then the second question was specifically for you, because you have an interest, or you are in business, and you said you went to get an MBA. I'm interested to know how did you communicate your experience in the Peace Corps and your applications, because I too am interested in applying for an MBA. And I also did have international experience. I studied in England for a year, but studying in England, right, is very much more posh, right, than studying.
Yeah, well pump in the morning.
You know what I'm saying? Then like studying in Nepal, for instance. So that's a different experience I'm looking for. So I know those are two like loaded questions.
No. So just to clarify, so you had 3 questions and you guys. So the first one is about Peace Corps support structurally and organizationally, correct? and then the second was being a woman in Peace Corps, and probably leads off that second question of support, which I'm not going to answer that question. And then the third, about how we were able to translate our experience, probably specifically looking at what business fits in. Is that kind of summing up what those were? All right, you want to take first?
Go ahead. I had some very supportive Peace Corps staff, but lived a little bit further away from them. So I found that my greatest support system in the Peace Corps were other volunteers. The people in my community were fantastic, and I consider many of them to be part of my family now. But I really relied heavily on support from my fellow volunteers to get you through the tough days, because they can see from the perspective both of being an American and a Peace Corps volunteer and a person living in Guatemala. So they have that much broader range. And
So will every Corps member have like a cohort of Americans?
Mm-hmm.
They will never be by yourself.
Well,
I was by myself in my town. I was the only volunteer placed in my town, but there are just other volunteers nearby. And we would meet up at each other's homes for the weekend, or go into a city to do some work, or with the internet, something like that. And cell phones are really popular now. I had one of the funniest experiences of my whole life there was seeing indigenous Mayan women in their traditional traje and everything, taking pictures on their camera phones of each other, getting on an escalator for the first time. Like, I've never seen an escalator, and they're with their camera phone. So it's not inexpensive to use your cell phone, but having people who understand exactly what you're going through, just a quick phone call away, was really, really helpful. Yeah, and the Peace Corps staff wasn't unsupportive, and when I did have an issue, they were really great helping handle that. But for emotional support and things like that, I really turned to my fellow volunteers.
It very much depends on where you are for how the culture is for women in general. I think, but again, Peace Corps staff, I also had a really incredible Peace Corps staff, and you get 3-month training. It can be different for every group, but in general, you have a training in country with all the volunteers together. So you are forming these close relationships with other volunteers. You know who's like a part of your Peace Corps team, and you have staff members who are like a phone call away, an email away, depending on how far away your site is. Like my site was like 4 hours, but they should come out to your site like once a year as well, if not more. And then the Peace Corps volunteers, like my nearest volunteer was like an hour away, and we definitely would have get-togethers, like sometimes once a week, sometimes every 2 weeks, but we'd like go into like the closest city and get coffee, or just like be together and like have someone who gets exactly what you're going through. So there is a good support system. Most countries now too, have access to cell phones, email. You can call home, or you can like send an email to your mom and be like, I want you to call me, like whatever. And so there is a lot of support. But in terms of like, so that's like the structural aspect, and then where you are as a volunteer will impact how you are treated as a woman. Like in Central America, there was a lot of like cat calls and like a lot of like, you can get marriage proposals, or you can just get a lot of attention as a woman, and that can be hard, and you have to, it's like your own process of how you deal with that, but you will experience that. But there is a lot of support, and it's recognizing that it's every woman in the community has that same experience, and even within your community you can talk about it, and it won't be the same because they've lived it, but there's a lot of good dialogue. And then people in your community, like, they get to know you, and they love you, and they care about you, and they want you to do well. So like, and you sometimes just have to reach out and like go up to somebody's house and be like, can I just hang out? And
They'll be
love
more
it.
than happy to have you.
They'll like feed you and like let you just chill, and I feel like it can be a very supportive experience.
And I would agree with that too, having served. My experience was earlier because I served I went in 1995, but I found that the staff were really supportive. Most Peace Corps countries have 2 to 3 months of training, and you'll go through, so you're going in with a group of volunteers that are either in the same sector or a related sector. So your first support network is the Peace Corps staff that you meet. Your other support network is all of the volunteers, your cohort, your training class of volunteers, as well as what is considered your sister class, so the group that went in the year before you that's in the same sector. They also provide a lot of support to volunteers as well. They're usually involved in your training, because when you're a new volunteer and you're sitting there, you're actually a trainee, and you're going through training, all you want to hear from is other current volunteers. You want to know what it's really like from a real volunteer. And they become a really good support network, as well as your community. And so the community that you live in provides a great support network as well. That also takes effort on your part. So you have to make sure that you get out to talk with the community, that you meet your neighbors, that you're involved with, you know, if you're staying with a host family, that you're involved with their activities, and that you really make that effort. And that's hard to do, especially when you don't really speak the language very well if you're learning a new language, and everything is foreign and different, and you're not sure that you're dressing the culturally appropriate way. I mean, those are hard things to do, so you have to have a lot of energy and will to do that. But that's really where you get your best support network. But then you're calling your friends that you've made, through the training community, through your training class. People who go in today, you've got cell phones, you can call home. I was calling home once a month, and I was handwriting letters. So my support network with family and friends back home was quite different, a very different experience than yours would be going in now. But still, that was great for me. I mean, my family was very supportive, which I'm very fortunate of, because I know not all families are supportive of people, of their sons and daughters going away for 2 years. But I found that to be a great support network, and I think the staff do a lot during your training to really go over, they train you on technical aspects, the language training, the culture, health, how do you stay healthy, and how do you stay safe, and they'll cover a lot of safety training with you. And so, your question about women, they'll cover a lot of that as far as, what's culturally appropriate for a woman to do in this, in this particular country. What kind of clothes can you wear, and what might draw more unwanted attention. They'll also, talk with the guys about that too, and they really encourage the guys to look out for, for the women in their group and everything. And, don't let somebody walk home from, if you go out to a bar, don't let one of the women walk home by themselves. Make sure, that, you're going with her, that she's getting home safely. Because the Peace Corps really does want to make sure that people are supported. They're also very supportive when something does happen, of really providing that support to the volunteer that they need, and making sure that they get all that they can possibly have while they're in the country. So I really, and that comes from a staff perspective as well, because I worked for headquarters for the last couple of years before coming to Michigan. So I have it from my volunteer perspective, but I also have it from the headquarters perspective of how much support they really do provide to volunteers. But you do have to, I think as a woman, I think at times you have to be willing to make some changes in your own behavior that may not be comfortable and may not be who you are, but to keep yourself safe, you have to be willing to make some changes to be accepted in the culture.
I would just add a couple of things to that. So in all the Peace Corps countries, they do have a safety and security officer who's on call 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. If anything ever happens, you have someone to call who will answer that phone. And that goes for the nurses as well in country. Peace Corps does an amazing job of teaching you and giving you guidelines to follow. And I would say the large majority of incidents that happen in Peace Corps, whether it's a pickpocketing, whether it's a robbery, whether, whatever, it's that someone wasn't following those guidelines, or someone was doing something that, Peace Corps had warned against or whatnot. And that's not to diminish any of the incidents. Like, horrible things happen everywhere. They happen in Ann Arbor. They, I mean, you guys all get those alerts, I'm sure, like a break-in or someone was jumped. Like, bad things happen everywhere. And I think that, it's just being aware of your situation, forming those relationships. That's really important to keeping you safe in those environments. Yeah.
I was going to say, pulling in those two questions that you did have, so we can definitely get to some other. My experience too was very unique in seeing the support that Peace Corps has for its volunteers. So I happened to be stationed in, with another volunteer. Actually, there was 2 British volunteers there, VSOs, and the support that was there in Nepal and Burkina, the 2 countries, was different in a lot of ways, because they're 2 different countries with 2 very different cultures and 2 different types of safety concerns. But the support was there. The 3 months of language training, probably if you do it, will be longer than you ever hoped it would be. But as you look back, will be some of the most salient pieces. And I also was one of those PCVs that, Peace Corps volunteers, that actually helped design the training for a subsequent group that was coming in. And so you really get this robust sort of technical training that sometimes can feel like really intense school and there's really intense language training. So you almost get tired because then you finish language training, then you got to go home and your family wants to talk to you. And you're like, I don't want to talk to anybody. Nobody in the room. But that support is there. That reinforcement is there. A few examples I give you of where I also felt supported in the community piece of it. In Nepal, my community was one of the best protection mechanisms ever. I was probably one of the first African American people that they seen. They thought I was everything but American for a while, which was very interesting. But they were the folks that really looked out for me. Even when we had to go through the evacuation, I did not feel at all at threat in my town. If something was going on, those folks would let me know. If we were going someplace, or if I was going out into some further villages, those folks really knew the terrain. They helped me through that. Being in, when we were back, to see the support and care that Peace Corps did, not only on making sure we weren't in a tough situation, and none of us really wanted to leave, to be honest. We kind of went kicking and screaming. Nobody wanted to leave their town. I didn't want to leave my host mom and sisters. I did not want to go. I actually asked if I stay here, we'll send the Marines to come get you. I was like, they take safety and security really simple, and your communities are the best part of that. The other part I see in the apparatus that Peace Corps had was not only protecting me physically, but actually being very concerned about me mentally in that process as well. When we were evac, there was a lot of care taken in that process. It was a slow evac, as slow as it could be. So we had some time to sort of say goodbye. We had some time to sort of process what was happening. When I transferred over to Burkina Faso, it was almost too seamless. They put me on a plane, I landed in DC, and I literally walk into headquarters and I meet this lady. She's like, "We're so sorry this happened. We know you're going over to Burkina." And they're yelling to the travel guy in the back, "Can we get a flight for him out today?" And somebody in another like, "No, he's got to get a yellow fever shot before he goes," you know? I mean, and they really wanted to keep me moving. So that time in DC was also healthy because I had a moment to sort of process what was happening before I took this next step. Continuing on with that, landing in Burkina, I had a modified training where everything you got in 3 months, I needed to kind of suck it down in a month. And I was at a point where I could read through banking code in French in a month from this amazing language trainer. That's the kind of support that's there. Now, I didn't like the process as we were going through. I was like, I don't want to talk to anybody, you know. But that was the type of support that was there. I broke my wrist when I was in Burkina biking, and they took care of me as well. You know, I had a cast, which was not fun in really hot weather. But I always joke and say my healthcare in Peace Corps is probably better than it is in the States.
Yeah,
Don't tell my PCO that, but seriously, I had amazing healthcare in Peace Corps, and so all those things I wouldn't be concerned.
Absolutely phenomenal.
Yeah. So
and the nurses, like Mackenzie mentioned, the nurses are just on call 24/7 for you. I have never felt so well cared for by anyone but like my mom in my entire life. Yeah. They really, and they provide all of your preventative health care.
Yeah, right.
They're making sure you have sunscreen and Band-Aids and Benadryl and just, but having such like close personal care providers like that was
it's kind of
experience.
Crazy. You get spoiled. Yeah. You get spoiled. And to the other point of translating your experience from Peace Corps specifically around business, my approach to Peace Corps, and I can't tell you how to apply, but as a recommendation to applying, sometimes you get really set on a place you want to go to, right? You want to, oh, I've heard about this country that I really, really want to go to. And one thing that Peace Corps does a really good job is matching your skills to where you probably would be a best fit. And so I would say as you go through the application process, think about what type of work you want to do. And focus on the work, because you'll land in some place that you may have never thought you were going to land will be the best thing that ever happened to you. Translating that experience. So I went in as this business guy. I had no idea what microfinancing was like when I showed up. I had no idea about small business development per se. I didn't really know Nepali business culture or Burkina Faso business culture. And so when I finished, one of the things that helped me in presenting myself to that business school was showing them, like you said, the ability to step in on the ground and learn, the ability to be able to translate culture into opportunities, the ability to be able, my functional work on the day-to-day, I could have a standing conversation at that point about somebody, not only about banking, but specialized banking in a developing country. I was able to talk to somebody about how do you manage and set up a bank in a communal currency. There's a 5-currency region that Burkina Faso shares a currency with. So I was able to talk about that stuff, and that's all from doing that as a volunteer. But most importantly, you're able to talk about how you get things done and how you do it responsibly to the communities that you're in. And so you come back, you're going to come back with a wealth of experience that actually you're going to have a problem at cutting the sort of the faucet off from all the stuff that happens. And so it takes time, but you'll be able to translate that stuff into stuff that's transferable, that's tangible, and you'll be living that stuff too. And I'll kind of stop there. Any other questions?
I have 2 questions. I know that 2 of you said you extended your stay there, and I was just wondering if that's common and like how that works. And also, I know some of you are going into school now. Are you participating in the Fellows program, or like just a little more info on that?
I'll go. I actually didn't, when I went in, I didn't realize people ever extended their service. So I didn't know anything about that until I got to Peace Corps. During my training, there were 3rd-year volunteers who were there, volunteer coordinators, to support incoming volunteers and to support the Peace Corps staff there. And I thought that sounded neat. It just, at that time, when I was just going in as a volunteer, I was 2 years is whoa. But what I learned though is that volunteers often will extend for a couple of months, and that's a little bit more common. They extend to work on a project because they want to wrap up the project and see it through. A 1-year extension in Peace Corps terms is really a 13-month extension. That's not so common. So they might have, if the post, Peace Corps post, the country you serve in, they call it post, has, let's say, 5 projects, there are often 5 volunteer coordinators, 1 coordinator per project. And that person is someone who's finished their 2 years and has extended for a 3rd year to provide support to the incoming training group, as well as support to that, to their boss, the Associate Peace Corps Director. And they call it a 13-month extension because you actually get 1 month of home leave at Peace Corps' dime, which is really sweet. Especially when you live really far away and it's expensive to get home. They send you back home, and they actually pay your per diem while you're at home. So you're staying at mom and dad's and you get a little extra cash, you know, for your living allowance. And you're still getting your living allowance. I mean, I don't know how they do it, but like you feel so rich. You know? But
you probably
when you've been living on a
Peace
Corps salary, you feel really rich at that point in time. But it's just so nice. I mean, they take really good care of you. That's, you know, part of the support we were talking about before. And so for me, it wasn't, I didn't extend as a volunteer coordinator. I extended to work on a pilot project, which is not as common, but it's one of those every now and then kind of things. When Peace Corps wants to move in a new direction, they are willing to consider 1-year extensions for that because it takes so long to really investigate what goes into a project and can we make this happen. And so that for me was how I ended up extending. Actually, I didn't think I could extend beyond a year. And so, until my boss said, well, you can just stay longer and we can keep working on this. And I said, no, I can't. Sure you can. And it just came down to, oh, I guess I can, so I'll stay another 6 months. And they tried to talk me into another 6 months after that, and I said, I think this is enough. I really love it, but this is it for me. So it does happen. It was something I was not really aware of beforehand. I'm so glad I did it, though. It was the right thing for me to do. But you know, that also meant for me losing my big support network in many ways because my whole training class finished. They all went home, except for, you know, 1 person or 2 who stayed on to work on their projects. Plus, I moved to a new community. So my original community that was my support network, which I just had become so ingrained in and attached to, was really hard to leave. But that was also a little easier because I moved to a new community, but I was able to go back and visit, so I had kind of a gradual departure. So I would still have my support network in country, both through Peace Corps and my host community, but I was able to form a new network in my new community. And you asked. respond to the others.
Yeah, so there's a number of options you can do to
Yeah.
extend your service. You can extend and work in office, which is like as the support staff. You can stay in your site, in your community. You can move communities in the same country, or you can move communities out into another country. And I extended mine in my site, and I did that specifically one for projects more than anything. I feel like once you've been there 2 years, you also realize how you don't get a whole lot accomplished your first year. You get a fair bit, but like you're really like learning the culture, how to get around, who to work
Figuring
with,
out where you
Right.
are.
all that. So your second year, you're really productive, and then your third year, you can be like super productive because you know how to do everything now. So it's fast, and you can like take your time, and it's just, it's nice. And you also have friends in your community. The biggest thing, the hard part, is the fact that your training class leaves. And that was, you don't realize how important that group, this core group of people is until they're gone. But third year, like in terms of common, so at least a number of, there's always people who stay in the office. That's pretty common. At least those 3 or 5 or however many projects there are. My group, the class before me, no one had stayed, they had extended, and then my class, like 10 of us stayed, which is pretty rare, but it also speaks a lot. It's to the country you place in. If you feel like your staff's pretty amazing, if you love where your site is. Some people are done at 2 years, they're like, okay, I need to be back in the States, like this is just too much. But it's an amazing experience. I loved my third year. And I'm not in the fellows program.
And I'm not either.
Yeah, I can speak to that. I am a fellow right now at the Ford School. So the fellows are great. It's, you kind of come back and you're like, you're still getting supported by Peace Corps, like, and all of these great things. And so there are a lot of other even benefits. There's the Masters International that you can look into before doing your Peace Corps service, which essentially combines your grad school and what you want to do with your Peace Corps experience. And so you receive credit, or sometimes it's essentially your master's thesis, or you write your thesis while you're in it. It really is just dependent upon the program. So that's a great way to kind of do both at the same time. But the fellows program is great. Like lots of places, it's half to full tuition. It's not quite that at Michigan, but still you're at a great school, and there is still help for they see the value in what you learn in Peace Corps and what you've done, that they want to have people that have had that experience in their program, so they offer help and assistance.
So did you apply while you were still in your country, or after you got back?
I actually I took advantage of the non-competitive eligibility, and I worked for the federal government for almost 2 years, and then I came back to school. So yeah.
One thing to keep in mind about the fellows program is once you there's a couple different ways that you complete Peace Corps, and you do, it's sort of like I don't want to say a honorable discharge in some way, but in some respects it sort of looks like that. And what happens is you are eligible for fellows programs throughout your life. Yeah. So for example, when I left Peace Corps, on my project, there weren't many business schools at the time, and so I actually wasn't able to. Eligibility is a piece that when you come back as a Peace Corps volunteer, you have a year that you are, in some respects, sort of considered like the same as an in-house government employee. So you're not necessarily applying with the broader general public, which helps you in that process applying for federal jobs. So that's another little benefit once you finish up.
And my two closest friends in the Peace Corps were both Masters International students and really speak tremendously about that experience. So they did it 6 months only, actually, for the two of them, of their Masters before they left for the Peace Corps, and then a full year when they got back. And loved it. And they just tell everyone how much they love it. They love talking about it. But and that really was a great experience for them, too.
Out of the 30 people in my training class, 10 of them were Masters International students. So we had a really large contingency. And they all, I think the majority of them were writing their thesis while they were in country. But yeah, a lot of them just had to go back and present, and they got their Masters and had their Peace Corps experience. So yeah.
Yeah, you look like you had one. You were holding it like, yeah. I'm like, go ahead.
So you've spoken a lot about, I guess, the good stuff that's happened. And you touched a little bit on this, but can you talk a little bit more about maybe the more negative or something that some unsatisfying aspect that you didn't expect or you weren't necessarily prepared for? And maybe I've heard of some people who end prematurely from before the 2 years, and maybe if you were close to that point and how you got through to kind of hold your ground and say, oh, I'm going to finish this.
Well, I can jump on that. I don't know if you remember, I said I broke my arm when I was there. Right. And so that was, I mean, for that in and of itself was not a really great experience. You do go through moments. I'm going to be honest with you, it's real life. You have certain moments that you're sitting in there, the random electricity has now went out. You finish your work day, it's been hot all day, and you're trying to figure out, what am I doing? Sometimes you get up and you have a horrible language day. You can't even ask for bread in the native language. You're off. You just get up and you can't say anything. There's times where you literally miss hearing someone speak English. And you hear someone speak English and you're like, you miss your family. Sometimes things, I had not only with the break on the arm, I mean, I had left this country that I sort of left my heart back there. That was a really, really tough experience to have. My work in Burkina for a long while was not going very well. It was tough. And I had to, it was just part of me, and that's where, like, the support system, I had Burkina Bay friends that would literally come to my room, come to my door and be like, we haven't seen you in like 2 days, so it's time for you to come outside. And I'm like, I don't want to come outside, and they help you through that process. We don't talk about this a whole lot during the sessions, but just stomach issues. Like, I remember going to a medical session and the nurse was up front. She said, so we have these packets, so when you get sick, you can, and folks are like, wait, what? You said when you get sick. She's like, yeah, you'll get something at some point. Because your body's acclimating to being in a new, it's just like if you traveled anywhere now. Your body's acclimating to new food, your body's acclimating to a new environment, new bugs, all types of stuff. And so there are some things that aren't necessarily always, seem to get glossed over. But the biggest part, it really is a transition of just sort of real life. And that's where those learning moments come in. Like, I and friends now commiserate over times like, remember when you had that one thing? Oh yeah, man, I was totally messed up and I had to come over and take care of you. You were no good, It becomes a talking moment. Or that time where you just seem to not be able to get anything done because you were having a hard time getting the language down. But then you get past that. I mean, that's a big part of that process. Like, the first year is a lot of you figuring out where you are and what you're doing. And then after that, it's sort of like smooth, I don't want to say smooth selling, but it's cool selling. So things can and do happen. Being an African American in Nepal was very challenging for a period of time. Being an African American in West Africa was also very challenging. And so these different expectations that come up with that. And so it really is a matter of how you manage it. And to that point, I had a couple people, a really good friend of mine, ET, which is early terminate. And it was tough because I was sort of figuring, I was like, why did you leave? You had this great family you were with, and she ET. And Peace Corps doesn't hold you hostage and say you have to stay in the country until you finish. And that was kind of a challenging moment. But at that moment, she was making the best decision for her. And I realized the best decision for me was to stay because I wanted to finish this and figure out what it was about. And I learned a hell of a lot from the folks that I lived with. So, yeah, we talked sort of in the past tense about how great it was. But you also got to remember we can talk about how great it was because it was so good that other stuff in concession doesn't even float out. It doesn't, like when I think about being sick, it has nothing to compare to the fact that my partner and I can go to an Nepali restaurant and I can go and connect with people that are there because I had that experience. Or that I know there's a microfinancing bank in Burkina Faso that is now opening up commercial access to people that no longer had it because I got the opportunity to work with them. You know what I mean? Like, so what? I'm sorry, I just got off on a tangent.
I always tell people that I had some of the absolute best days of my life in the Peace Corps, and I had some of the worst days of my life. It's true, and I think one of the hardest days for me, I had a friend from college that passed away, and it wasn't a family member, it wasn't my best friend, so I came to this like moment, this like critical, like, am I going to spend the money to go back for that funeral, which isn't about me, and like it's not. That was a really, really hard time. And people, there's no good way to say this, but people die frequently in Guatemala from all sorts of things. So the people in my community they're like, it's not your sister, like, why are you so worked up about this? And I felt very, very alone. I had a really hard time getting through that. And my boyfriend also early terminated, and that was really difficult too. And there were some really like low points. They talk about being on a roller coaster all the time, and you're like, yeah, like every couple of weeks. I was like up and down on that roller coaster 10 times in one day sometimes. Like, I'm like, this is the best day ever. This is the worst day. You know, like it really, but I think some of those things would have been difficult anywhere. So it's just learning how to rely on the people that you do have there to help you get through some of that stuff, and really like looking at your resource, what's available to you, not only people, but other ways to cope with things. And figuring out how to use those to your advantage, because they're likely going to be different ways to cope with things than you might have in the States. And it's important to be able to really find those things and not be afraid to ask for help when you need it and things like that.
Yeah. I'd agree. It's so helpful to identify what your own coping strategies are, because they're different for everyone. For some people, it's getting out and doing some exercise. For others, it's journaling, writing about it. For someone else, it's going out and playing a game or visiting people. Everybody has a different method, and that might change over time too. But I mean, I had all sorts of ups and downs. After I extended and started on the pilot project, I was so excited about it, but then it wasn't going anywhere. Like the first 4 months were awful to me, because I felt, oh my God, I'm failing. I got this 1-year extension, I can't get anything done, and it was so frustrating. And it just was a matter of, I really wanted to see how to make it work, and so I kept finding the people that I could work with who did want to work and did want to manage to, find out how can we try to make this project work, rather than the ones who basically weren't very helpful and that interested. And the more I did that, the better things got. And so that for me got me through that point, and it actually just really went super well after that. But there are definitely a lot of days, and it is a roller coaster, and sometimes you're on the roller coaster up and down, but really finding those coping mechanisms. For me, I found that, sometimes I just didn't want to talk to anybody. Like I didn't want to hear Spanish. I didn't want to hear Guarani, which is the other language in Paraguay. I just didn't want to talk, and I'd like hole up in my house for 2 or 3 days, outside of work. But like I just wouldn't go out until finally I'm like, well, this is dumb. It's not helping me any. I'm just sitting in here cranky and whining, and there's nothing I can do about it. So then it was just like go out, and I'd go out and visit with my friends and stuff, and it would pull me out of the mood. But it was something like I needed that trigger of like, Kim, go out there and talk to somebody. Don't just sit around your home and with the doors closed. I mean, that's not helping any. So you learn what your methods are and your strategies, and that's when you have to remind yourself, okay, go do whatever it is that you need to do to make it feel right inside.
And they're weird. I would listen to like really sad podcasts, and they would make me cry. And that once I got that out, I was like, all right, moving on. And I would have never done that here, that's what I found I like needed to.
Yeah.
You'll find sometimes the physical place you're in will also pull you out of whatever you're in. I had the opportunity when I was in Burkina. There was a small, it wasn't a mosque, but it was more like a meeting and prayer area outside of my house. So I would wake up to the call of prayer in the morning. And I remember this one morning I was in a little bit of a funk, and the call of prayer came on, and I opened my gate. And in Burkina, it's really dry, red, dusty in the area I was in. But folks were really colorful garments and all this stuff. And I woke up this morning, it was after this big dust storm the day before, and I opened my gate and I see this, it literally looks like a sea of people in this colorful garb, all meditating and praying at the same time. And it was just like a moment right there where it just shook me, and I said, wow, this is absolutely freaking beautiful. This is ridiculous. And so those times, or you have that really funny conversation, or you say something that is just stupid, and somebody's like, you meant to say weak and not elephant. Yeah, that's right. So there's these things that can pull you out of it, but it is real life. I mean, you could go, all of you right now, we could all move to some random big city and go off in our different, and you could experience some of the same stuff. The one difference would be you would have the cultural aptitude at that point to be able to try to deal with it. And one of the challenges when you go overseas, you have to, like you said, you have to identify what it is, because you're in a different culture, and so you might not have the video arcade if you go to, I just dated myself, or you may not have you know, your best friend right up the street. So you just adapt and you figure out how to push through it.
Can I just add one last comment on that? Regarding people who do choose to early terminate, or ET, in the Peace Corps we'll just say ET, early terminate, there's nothing wrong with early terminating. And for some people that is absolutely the right thing for them to do. And I actually find that for a number of people it's a very mature and difficult decision that they come to. But if you can't find the way to be happy and to do the work that you need to do, and it's not working for you, and that's the decision you reach, that's okay. And I just always, you know, I had a lot of friends who ended up early terminating for various reasons, and I know other people who have, and it isn't for everyone. Sometimes it's just, maybe it's not the right time right now. But there are things that happen at home, and you know, somebody wants to go home and be with their family because they have a sick relative, or whatever the reason is, that's okay. And I always think it's important for people to realize, don't feel like you have to push yourself through, because it's like, oh, I survived, I did it for 2 years. If you're not going to be happy for those 2 years, find what's going to make you happy and pursue that.
I think one thing that they all address definitely a lot of the challenges and whatnot. It's also, in this day and age, we have Facebook. We are very connected, I think, no matter where you are. Those big things in life that happen, you get to see, you know, your friends are doing this, or it's Thanksgiving and you don't get to go home. And I can remember the day that I was like, October 24th, 2008, like, I was like, I am going home, I'm done with this, like, no more, I can't deal with this anymore. But I had planned this trip to the beach in Guatemala for Thanksgiving with all of my friends, and I have to tell you, eating mahi-mahi, like grilled, like, you know, caught fresh that day, was like the best Thanksgiving I've ever had. And it's just like learning to accept that like life may be going on and you don't get to spend those big events, or you don't get to go to someone's wedding, or you don't whatever, but you're having these really cool experiences. Like, I'm never going to have a Thanksgiving like that again. I'm never going to have like that. I have this great, you know, thought. And so it is, I think, a big challenge is realizing that there are cool things going on at home and that life is going on without you, but your life here is also going on, and you're making these really cool memories and things that you're going to have that no one else is going to have. So
no, and when everyone at home sees your picture of you on top of the volcano,
I was going to say that's probably one of, and you know, we probably all can agree that one of the really, I don't want to say like dirty secrets of Peace Corps is like, you go over with this ambition like, we're going to change the world, you know, like, we got this, we're going to do it. And you actually finish up feeling really bad because you learned so much more than you ever gave. I mean, even if you give all of yourself, there's still something that you pull away with that you're just like, man, those people were amazing and they taught me a whole lot. And it sometimes it propels you when you get back to continue to stay active and to continue. That's why I think it's such a life, when you talk about life-changing experience for people, because there's something about that that just drives you when you get back. You're like, okay, so one, I can do some stuff that I didn't even expect I could do. And then two, there's some responsibility to sort of pick up and do some stuff with it. I don't know where I was going with that, but I mean, it's big time. Yeah, go ahead.
I do have a question, and I'm asking this on behalf of somebody I know who's doing Peace Corps or just finished. This issue about dating that no one wants to ask. Because like either A, you're going into the Peace Corps and you're dating someone at that particular time you're making that decision, or you're in the country and you're dating people there, or you're not allowed to date because of cultural expectations. Like, how did you all manage that? And also possibly dating other volunteers. If that's too much. Just
those are good questions.
You might need to cut the camera off. No. You don't need to document it. No. Everyone's like, ooh.
So I will say from the like application perspective, if you are involved in a romantic relationship, there are like some additional questions, and Peace Corps wants to make sure, like, it's a big investment to send volunteers abroad. They want to make sure that you know you are committed to the 27 months, and obviously, I mean, they don't want to influence a breakup or, you know, doing something that's not right for your relationship. They just want to make sure that you're at that point and that you know what that commitment's going to be, at least from the pre-departure point of the romantic relationship, dating someone before you go.
And you also, you can be placed, if you're a married couple, you know, you'll be placed with your husband or wife, But if you're dating, they do not send you, they do not place
Right.
you,
No.
they don't make any special exceptions for people in relationships, so.
Yeah. And a lot of people in my group, who went in with partners, didn't finish having those same partners from the States.
Yep.
You were experiencing so many things
Yeah.
that are so hard to communicate to someone else. And you are lonely beyond lonely, and so many times in your service that it's so hard to be like, you are so far away and you have no idea what I'm going through. Dating can happen, just like it can happen anywhere. People in like some different scenarios, people in my training class, some of them married host country nationals. They married Costa Ricans,
Same here.
went back with them, or took them home. A few of them, I don't know if any of them stayed. I think they all brought them back at some point. People dated people in their sites. You have to be very careful about dating people in your sites because of all of the cultural issues, and if you break up, will that impact your work, because this is your job, it's not just your home. I mean, it's everything in one, which is really hard to navigate. Dating other Peace Corps volunteers can be a great experience, because some of my volunteers like ended up marrying the person they were in service with, because you have this incredible shared experience, but you also may be 8 hours away from that person, which is really hard because it's just like in the States trying long distance. I mean, it's a long distance relationship. And so that, like, I tried dating sometimes, and then it was like, you're 8 hours away, like, this is so hard. And so there's like a plethora of experiences, and dating is possible. And some people come away married and have had amazing experiences, and some people came away being like, I wish I didn't date for 3 years or 2 years, and like that's your life.
I can speak to the documentation you were talking about. I was leaving school and young and wide-eyed and bushy-tailed, but I was dating somebody at the time, and I knew I was going to be dumped. Like you see the dumping coming. I'm putting a lot of business out here. This also happens in Peace Corps. You just talk frankly about stuff. So I was on the verge of, I knew I was going to be dumped, and so I'm having this Peace Corps interview, and the recruiter's like, so are you dating? Someone was like, yes, and then she pulls this form. I said, but I'm going to be dumped pretty soon. So no, I still need to work through this documentation. So I'm like, so do you know I'm leaving for 27 months? Yeah, so could you fill it out? And as being a guy in Nepal, it was very interesting because I really didn't date just because of culture. It was much easier in Nepal for our women volunteers to be able to date because of the cultural apparatus and the type of effect a dating relationship would have on a young lady if I didn't marry her. So I was kind of solo at site for some time. That doesn't mean I didn't get a whole lot of proposal offers or people saying, I know someone. I'm like, thank you, that is great. Did you meet my young daughter? That's okay, that's fine. She's a nice young lady. A lot of that happening. To this day, my host mom is still, are you married yet? I know someone. No, I'm not married yet, and I'm glad you know someone. And it's similar in Burkina, and then I went to Burkina, which was a different experience. I was in the capital, and so it was not, and the culture was very different from Burkina Faso, a lot more progressive than sometimes people think. And so folks did date. I know, and a lot of my volunteer friends are married to host country nationals like Nepalese or Burkina Faso. Some of those volunteers are together and have great relationships, and so it really depends. There's so many variables. Where you are, your site, I mean, all of these things, the cultural apparatus, but you just sort of make it through. But you create other relationships that are valuable if you can't necessarily date anybody.
And then you're connected to this amazing Peace Corps network afterwards.
I mean, look at us.
Which
Which is good, because I think sometimes the only other people who will date you are everyone else is like, I do not want to hear about your podcast again.
Okay, well, I think we're going to wrap it up, but if you guys have any other questions, you guys are more than welcome. I'm sure you guys could stay for a couple of minutes afterwards. Ask them, personally, or we have office hours. You can email us if those times don't work for you. We can set up another time. We're all pretty open people, so I can connect you with other RPCVs in the area. There's a lot of us around Ann Arbor. Thanks for coming tonight. Thank you.